Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Patrick Malone, and I just wanted to say welcome. Julie, were you going to have any words before everyone, before I got started, or was I supposed to just start? All good. Okay, thanks, Julie. Hey, everyone. My name is Patrick Malone, and I'm a faculty member here at American University in the School of Public Affairs, and really happy to see you all. Actually, I don't really see you technically, but it's nice to see your names and the boxes on the screen. And I appreciate you coming to this particular session about kindness. So if you'll bear with me here, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm actually coming to you from an undisclosed location in North Carolina with a few bugs back here. I think that'll stop soon, hopefully. So let me share my screen and we'll kind of get rolling. Hold on. All right, there we go. There we go. So I do want to encourage you as we kind of get started here. Please, by all means, if there is a question that you have, don't hesitate to send me a text to, you can chat, you can chat, you can just interrupt me, not a problem at all. It's completely good. I'm very laid back with these presentations, but I'm pretty passionate about this particular subject, which is why Vicki asked me to be a part of this today. But please, by all means, just don't hesitate to reach out. Just stop me, say, Patrick, hold it. We have a question. Patrick, stop. You're talking too much. Patrick, your jokes aren't funny. All of those things work for me. So I'm going to take it, since I don't see anything in the chat room right now, I'm going to try to pull up. I want to make sure I can see the chat here. Hang tight. There's my chat. Good. Okay, excellent. I can see chat now, so I can follow everybody, and we should be in good shape. I'm also going to, if you all don't mind, I'm going to take my video off for the moment because it will be easier for transmission for me. You'll get a little bit better signal if I do that. And all you need to see anyway are the slides. So by all means, please chime in if you guys need anything. And welcome to the Resetting Your Work as a Leader with Kindness at the Center. You know, I typically change the titles of these presentations right up until the time that I do them. And I did that with this one this morning. In fact, I changed it to this, Kindness Now. And here's why. We have a serious lack of kindness in the workplace. And as we do career transition, as we move from one place to another, you know, one of the things I always encourage our leaders to do is to lead from a position of kindness. And that means leading from the heart and leading from the soul. We work in my program at American University, we work primarily with federal executives and senior federal executives around the country. And one of the things that I know they struggle with is you know, it's hard to be kind. It's a very difficult job. That's true in any sector, frankly. It's you know, never enough resources, never enough time. It's not an easy thing. So let's get into this. And what I want to do is share with you kind of some of the things that are kind of out there in the research right now on kindness, but also some of the science and the data behind kindness. Because unlike just being a soft skill, something along those lines, kindness really does have a strong neuroclinical, neuroscientific background. And the reason we feel good when we do it are very good reasons, actually. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. So our world changed. And the reason that I say our world changed is because just around March of this year, when things started to shut down, all of a sudden this country went into a new era. One where the people that we lead are stressed, they're afraid, and they're lonely. And I want to stress something here, and that is that one of the things that happened right before the pandemic hit, immediately before the pandemic hit, one of the things that occurred is that a couple of very important studies came out talking about stress and fear and loneliness. And these were before the pandemic hit. So when you see what I'm about to show you, think in terms of the fact that this is what the workplace looked like before we were under the stress that we're under now. For example, stress. One Gallup survey showed that there were 83% of US workers suffered from work-related stress, and that organizations lose billions and billions of dollars every year as a result of workplace stress. So this data was collected back at the end of 2019 and was released in early 2020. Right before the COVID hit. So we knew that stress was a problem even before that. We also knew that people were afraid. I pulled this data down on March 4th of this year, but it came from a survey by Chapman University. Chapman does a survey every year. It's their American Fear Index survey that they perform at the end of every calendar year. And Chapman found that of the top 10 fears that Americans had, these three, were related to people being sick or medical bills. So 3 of the top 10 fears Americans had prior to COVID were about illness or dying or high medical bills. Interestingly, the number 1 fear was corrupt government. So they were afraid of the government that they depend on to care for them, and they were also afraid of these 3 factors, which are tied to healthcare and to illness. And keep in mind, this is prior to COVID. There was a White House briefing in late March where an NBC reporter asked the president the following question. He said, nearly 200 dead, 14,000 sick, millions who are scared. And he asked, what do you say right now to Americans who are scared? And the president's reaction, the president actually chose not to react to that particular question, but the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, did. And what Eric Garcetti said was, it's okay to be afraid. We have to be okay to be afraid, because right now that's exactly what is happening right now in our nation, is that people are scared, they are worried. So the other fears that we're seeing, of course, the economy, sheltering in place, and we're seeing all kinds of negative impact to that. Human beings were not made to do that for a lot of reasons. This phrase, abundance of caution, is something that we are, we see now that we had not heard of before. We hear it all the time now. So we know that it's out there as well. So people are also lonely. So once again, I mentioned that these surveys came out at the end of 2019 and were released prior to the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, over 60% of Americans reported being lonely. This survey was done in 2015, where they found that loneliness and mortality death and mortality were tied to loneliness. So we know that loneliness and social isolation has an impact on us as human beings. We also know, just a few years later, when they released this data, this was the data that came out in January, that 61% of those that were surveyed report being lonely. And this was prior to the pandemic. This was prior to the social isolation that we're all facing right now. So very significant findings here where loneliness is concerned. And when I read this data, I thought, well, I'm sure the young generation's fine. I'm sure they're okay, because I thought there's no way. I mean, with the young generation, they're going to be good with this because they're good with social media, they're good with social platforms. Turns out that that's not the case. And as leaders, especially as leaders going into new environments or new positions, transitioning into a career where we might be working with younger generations or might be supervising them, it's important to know, because what we found in this survey was that of those age 18 to 22, 73% reported being lonely, sometimes or always. And of those 73%, if they were heavy social media users, they were much more likely to be lonely. Older folks were pretty good. Those of us that are in the boomer generation or the Xers, we're doing okay. And the reason for that, according to most social scientists, is because we have a much stronger connection of human-to-human contact that we've built over the course of our professional and personal lives. So generationally, this loneliness is impacting all of our folks. So I bring this up, and I preface this discussion on kindness with this, because I think it's important for us to be aware that right now our workplace is stressed. Our workplace is afraid and lonely, and they were this way prior to COVID. So we know we've got a big challenge ahead of us. And that brings us to what's happened since then. And what's happened is that there's been a much higher increase in alcohol, tobacco, and drug use. You might have heard of the COVID-15. That's the 15 pounds we're all gaining. I saw it today referred to as the COVID-30, so it's gone up. So great, that's good, I guess. Increased tobacco and alcohol use. We know alcohol use is up by over 25%. Chronic health problems are not being treated as well. Concentration, sleeplessness, and a change in routine. And this change in routine is big because we all struggle with changes in routine. Even those of us that say, oh, I'm crazy, I'm fun, I'm silly, I do crazy things. Not so much. We really do depend on routine. It's a very, very important part of what we do. So by all means, this is what's going on right now. And this is why kindness, if ever there were a time for kindness, now is the time. There's a guy named Jack Kerouac who is the founder of the Beatnik movement, and I'm a child of the 60s. So for me, this guy I thought was a pretty cool dude. And he said, practice kindness all day to everybody, and you'll realize that you're already in heaven now. And that's a pretty powerful statement, because I have a kindness theory. And in fact, I was talking before we got started, I was talking with Julie before we began, and I said, you know, Julie, we were going through my slides, and she said, hey, wait a second. She goes, did I just see a slide of the Dallas Cowboys? And I said, yes, you did. Here's my kindness theory. If we had more Dallas Cowboy fans in the world, we'd all be more kind. So, and I know that that's going to offend some of the Washington Redskin fans in the room. I apologize for that. Actually, I don't. I was raised in Texas, so the Dallas Cowboys to me are the team, and that is Dak. And no, we're not America's team. Everyone, I'm sorry, I keep switching that. We are not America's team. We are God's team. I apologize. It's just the way it is. I know the seminarians are in the room, but hey, listen, I can't help. It's written in Genesis. I can show it to you sometime. In any event, so here we are with kindness. Now, I would like to ask you all just kind of a quick Zoom question. And if you could just toss this into the chat for me, that would be great. I'll give you a second to do this. Where do you think is the kindest state in the United States? What is the kindest state in the U.S.? Anybody just chime in? I'm going to look at the chat. Oh, Minnesota, good call on Minnesota. Any other guesses? Oh, not Tom, good call on Minnesota. There we go. Maine, nice. Okay, that's a good one as well. This is great. You all are engaged. This is terrific. Here you go. Kindest state, doggone right, Minnesota. Look at that. Number one, and number one consistently. Number one consistently. And it's that Midwestern kindness thing. I don't know, Tom, why is Minnesota so kind? Is it just, are the people just nice? They're just laid back, or are they too cold? What's going on up there? So I think you got that one right. That's a good one. Let me try the next one for you all. How about this one? What is the unkindest state in the U.S.? Unkindest state in the U.S. Anybody at all? Give me a couple thoughts here. I'm looking forward to seeing this as well. New Jersey. Washington. Hey, so I can't tell if that's a Karen or a Ken Garcia, who that is, but for Garcia, Washington, why do you say Washington? Is that Washington, D.C. or Washington State? Washington, D.C. or Washington State? I'm curious. Washington State. You know what? That's a good call. It's not number one, but it is up there. So here you've got New York, Arkansas, Delaware, Massachusetts, New Jersey. There's New Jersey. Thank you for that, Eric. And then Washington. I tell you the reason. You know what? Good call. Yeah, sorry about Delaware, man. I don't know what to tell you. But I can tell you right now, I've got two daughters that transplanted to Seattle from the East Coast. And there's a thing out there called the Seattle Freeze. And they have told me consistently, they've been out there for years now, and they've told me consistently that it's just not that welcoming out there. I mean, you'd think with the trees and the marijuana laws and all the stuff going on out there, you'd think everything would be much cooler, but I guess it's just not that friendly. But they do love it. They're still there. So I guess there must be something good about it. So anyway, hey, don't take these too seriously. These are tourist magazines that do these kind and unkind state things, but I always think they're kind of fun to have a look at. I'm surprised about Arkansas, frankly. Anyway, okay, let's get back to kindness. So, you know, kindness is something that we know it when we see it, and we know it when we don't. And what I want to do is I want to show you an example of unkindness. And I also want to talk a little bit about the impact of unkindness in the workplace. And then we're going to move to talking about the positive, what really happens. And we're talking about measurable, significant organizational impact, a positive impact of kindness in the workplace. So that's going to be kind of the place we're going to go. I've got a couple of Zoom questions I want to ask you all to chime in on. But as I mentioned, kindness, we know it when we see it, we know it when we don't. Check this out. This is kindness, and it's not really kindness. So this is a don't do this. This is not kindness. Check this out.
Oh, hello, everyone. I am happy to report I'm feeling much better.
Good for you.
Yeah. My fever is gone, my sinuses are pressure-free, and my mucus is as clear as a Yosemite waterfall.
Glad to hear it.
I'll be able to return to work tomorrow. Yay. Well, why isn't everyone happy? Your little ray of sunshine is ready to beam again.
You really don't know why?
No, but I knew that his yay was sarcastic. It's not bad for a guy whose last bowel movement sounded like rain on a roof.
Let me refresh your memory.
Petty, rub Vicks on my chest.
Sheldon, I cooked you breakfast. I made your bed. I checked your mouth for thrush. You can rub your own chest.
Sure, grope every other man on the planet, but draw the line with me.
I brought you a little care package from work. It's our latest antiviral and the best decongestant we make.
I hope laughter is the best medicine, because this care package is a joke.
Hey, she came all the way here.
You're gonna want to take these with food.
Sheldon, stop being a baby and let Emily take a look at you.
She's a dermatologist.
I went to medical school.
In that case, try removing the irritating patch of brown skin standing next to you.
Here you go.
Leonard, I'm dying.
You're not dying. It's just the flu.
I asked for chicken noodle. This is chicken and stars. It's killing me.
I never did get that chicken noodle, did I?
So how did we get here? I mean, you know, it's interesting when you look back at the turn of the century, from the 1800s to the 1900s. We were a nation of hardworking immigrant men and women, and unfortunately, they were not treated well, and they were not treated well by these managerial overlords who walked the halls of factories where people worked ungodly hours in terribly unsafe conditions. This was really the beginning of leadership theory for our nation. This is, you know, and everyone on this line, I'm sure, has had some leadership classes of some sort. And if you recall, the earliest theories of leadership were called the great man theory. And the great man theory, and I stress man because that's ridiculous too, but it's the gender stupidity that we've had, you know, in our nation for many, many years. But the great man theory was the strength of these managerial overlords, these strong-willed, loud, abusive, in charge, large and in charge men that walk these floors. And that's where the first part of leadership theory began. And so over the years, this has still been out there. And even now, we still praise those silly morons who are out there that are the big, you know, loud, bigger than life, you know, just kick butt kind of people. And in reality, you know, they're not the ones that really make things happen. There's always going to be people like that. They're going to be successful. I'm not saying there's not. But what I am saying is that they're not as successful as they could have been if they would have taken a different approach. And so we get here mainly because, you know, for one reason, history. And also because right now in our nation, we see a lot of bad behavior. I mean, we see behavior of bosses that's extraordinarily challenging. Christine Parath has done a lot of nice research on this, and she looked at the workplace and found that bosses in the workplace, as reported by their staff, exhibit these kind of behaviors. They interrupt people, they talk down, they put people down, they take too much credit. These are things that bosses simply do. And when you ask them, by the way, the top three are the ones that are the most common that we see. So interrupts people, judgmental, and shows little interest in others' opinions. So there's not, I usually ask folks what they think is the most harmful, because they're, you know, and usually the most harmful is generally talks down to people. That's or puts people down, puts others down. But this is a behavior that's out there right now. And when Christine did this research, she found that in 2005, that 25% of the workforce reported being treated rudely at least once per week. And by 2010, that number doubled. And by 2015, it was at 54% that were reporting being treated rudely at least once per week. And when you ask bosses why they do it, this is what they say. They say they hibernate into their e-gadgets, they use jargon, they ignore invitations, they email and text others during meetings, they take others for granted. So this is what they'll admit to doing. And when you ask them, okay, but why? Here's what they say. 50% say they're overloaded. So here's one of the main messages I'd really like for you to take away today. And I don't know how many people on this line are working in the public sector versus the private sector, but I can tell you right now, in the public sector folks that I work with, they always claim they're overloaded. And the fact is they are. And the fact is everyone else is as well. Nobody that I know of works in an industry that I'm aware of that is ever able to straighten up everything on their desk and say, oh, look, I'm all caught up. I'm all caught up. I'm going to go home for the day. Nobody does that, especially not in a leadership role. So we're never going to say, we're never, ever, ever going to be just like, oh, this is great. I'm not overloaded. We're always going to be overloaded. We're never going to have enough people. We're never going to have enough time. And this is another thing they say. They say we don't have enough time to be nice. Well, that's a ridiculous argument. It takes a nanosecond to be nice. It can be a simple nod. It can be a smile. It can be a thank you. It can be a response to an email. But it doesn't take a lot of time to be nice. So these arguments don't hold water with me, and they don't hold water with most. I mean, we know that everybody's busy and we don't have a lot of time. When we're not nice in the workplace, this is the problem that we start to face. When we are working in places that are marked by unkindness, people that work in those areas end up with depressed immune systems, with elevated glucocorticoids, which leads to obesity and blood problems, all kinds of issues. One study in 2012 tracked women for 10 years and found they were 38% more likely to have a heart-related event if they worked in an unkind environment. And one 2018 study found that gratitude, compassion were better and more important to patients than clinical skills of their clinicians. That tells you a lot. I'm going to share a little bit more about that as well, because in the medical field, this is a pretty hot area right now. And there's more. So I mentioned the clinical side. There was a study done of 4,500 doctors and nurses. 71% of them tied medical errors to patient death. Medical errors, to rudeness, to toxicity. And 27% tied patient deaths to toxicity or rudeness in the workplace. And I can tell you how I know this is true. I started my career as a surgical tech. And for those of you that are not familiar with what that is, that's the person that passes instruments in the operating room. So you're in charge of the sterile field, you're in charge of all the instrumentation, you usually end up closing the patient, all that kind of thing. And I worked in environments before where I had angry surgeons throwing instruments and throwing little, fits because they were mad. And I can tell you right now, it shuts you down. It absolutely shuts you down. In fact, Patrick, or David Rock rather, calls this neural shutdown. And it happens to us. When we're embarrassed or treated rudely in front of other people, we go into a neural shutdown. We are not able or capable to see as clearly as we could. We're not as innovative as we were. We're not able to make good decisions. We're not able to ask good questions. So this shutdown is very, very real. And whenever we're treated rudely or treated unkindly, this does happen to us. There's a very famous study of seminarians that was done years ago, where they were on a campus of a seminary, and they staged this such that half of the seminarians going to class would witness two actors. They didn't know they were actors, one pretending to be homeless and one pretending to be a person just berating the homeless person and yelling mean things at them. And then the other half of the seminarians did not see this. So they stationed these actors in a place on the campus where only half of the student body would see them. And then they gave the entire student body tests on innovation and creativity. The people that witnessed the abuse scored demonstrably lower than the people who didn't. And they attributed this to what they had just witnessed. So we know it stays with us. So let me ask you this. What is the kindest thing you all have witnessed recently? Anybody, just type it in, or if you just want to speak it out loud, whatever you like. I'm curious to see the kindest thing that any of you have witnessed recently. And while you're thinking about that and typing in, I'll share what I've seen, especially since the pandemic, is I've seen a bit more respect, certainly for space. I see people apologize more often. I see people being just a little kinder. Not everywhere. There's some places that people don't want to wear masks and people look at you weird if you're wearing a mask at places like that. But I think that there is definitely some kindness out there. Anybody else? Anything else out there that you all can think of? Any other kind acts at all? Oh, that's brutal. I hate to see that because that tells me that there's not a lot of them out there. That's terrible. But it is difficult to see them sometimes. It can definitely be a challenge. And so I think that one of the things that we have to do is keep that in mind because what we do know is that we are naturally inclined for kindness. We know that when children are born, even up to early as 18 months old, they are more inclined to feel kindness to others, and they'll reach out to help someone in need, even if they don't know, and at that age they don't really have a perception of exchange or exchange theory. They don't know that they're going to get something for helping somebody out. They do it as well. Oh, Julie, I like that one. I just see a few coming in now. I think people are making more connections. Yeah, thank you. And then helping families in need in the neighborhood with meals. That's great. Chalk on the sidewalk. Have a nice day. That's awesome. That's terrific. Love those. And we are inclined. I mean, look, we want this. And we do know that if 18-month-olds see pictures or if they see it like a little toy bear or something that looks like it's sad, they'll instinctively reach out toward that bear to kind of lend some comfort. We also know that just 2 minutes of new kind activities will rewire our brain, and that's awesome. Eric, thank you. Helping people shop for groceries, yes, no doubt. We also know that the evidence shows us that kindness leads to more success, it leads to better wealth, it leads to better health, and it leads to better relationships. We also know that people who smile are perceived as 27% warmer, 13% more competent, and 22% more civil. So there's no doubt that this is happening, and it is something. And I want to talk for just a second about the rewiring because I shared this in last week's session very briefly. One of the things that happens as we go from career to career, as we grow up in a certain career and choose to change to another one, we develop thinking patterns, and it's not just professionally, they're personally as well, where we learn to think in certain ways, and these horizontal patterns kind of haunt us. They're good for emergencies. They're not always good for making good decisions because it's where our brain naturally defaults. And where our brain defaults when we're getting about to get hit by a bus, that's a good place. But where our brain defaults if we grew up in an environment where certain groups of people were looked down on and 30, 40, 50 years later, we're still feeling that way, well, that's not such a good thing. So these horizontal pathways are important to try to rewire. And by doing something new every day, like being kind actively, that's a good thing. And that can rewire our brain to think differently. And then it becomes easier, it becomes a natural part of what we do. Some evidence that came out of Oxford as well talked about an impact on well-being, kindness ranking above physical attractiveness on dating sites. So that's very common, that kindness ranks very high on dating sites. We know that people find kindness attractive. Patients' colds, I mentioned the research before about the confidence in providers. Providers, I used to teach at a medical school when I was in the Navy, and I was on the faculty at the medical school at Uniformed Services University, and my medical students, we used to talk about this a lot. And I told them, look, you're smart and you've got a lot of diplomas and those things are great, but if your patients don't think you're listening to them, you're much more likely to be sued. And you are, regardless of the clinical outcome. And we know that patients who believe that their providers are listening, that they care, providers that are kind and compassionate, they're less likely to get sued, and their patients do better because they feel cared for. Of course, the effects of stress, lowering the effects of stress and social anxiety matter a lot as well. I want to show you a quick video of some work that's being done right now out at the University of California, Berkeley. And I want to encourage you to take a look at this website. It's called the Greater Good Science Center. If you just type in Greater Good into Google, it'll pop right up. They are doing some magnificent research on kindness and on compassion and caring. So check this out.
Our science has started to discover facial expressions for, laughter and compassion and embarrassment. My name is Dacher Keltner, and I'm a professor of psychology at UC Berkeley, faculty director of the Greater Good Science Center. point of fact, Charles Darwin, who's greatly shaped my research, argued in 1871 that sympathy is our strongest instinct. Very impressively, scientists are starting to pinpoint really a network of neurons in the brain that helps us empathize. Now we find when we feel compassion in humans, that part of the brain lights up. That part of the brain is connected to oxytocin networks. And we know oxytocin is this amazing neuropeptide that helps us empathize and be generous. That tells us that kindness is biological, and it's part of the human imperative or human nature. I think your question also is asking another question.
What we do here is we study emotions and what makes people happy, and part of that is based in feeling compassion and reading other people's emotions.
One of the things we learn is how even very small gestures of compassion and kindness, even those in the lab, really make you feel more satisfied, more content on just an everyday level.
We're starting to learn that as you practice kindness, it shifts your nervous system and you're healthier, right? That kindness and compassion may be as powerful a determinant of physical health as smoking. So we're in the Greater Good Science Center, and our Director of Strategic Partnerships, the inimitable Susan Fassberg.
Most places that research behavior are looking at what goes wrong between people, and we're looking at what goes right.
We're taking the science of compassion and altruism and getting it out to tens of thousands of people.
One of the most exciting messages for people is it's not just a question of how you're born. Are you born happy, or are you born a certain way? That these are not only teachable skills but learnable skills.
When you really cultivate compassion, you really potentiate or activate a lot of the great emotions that make up the meaningful life.
So everyone will see this is a really tremendous amount of work that's being done out there at Berkeley, and they're doing some really amazing stuff on kindness. I really encourage you to pull up that website, and thank you, Julie, for sharing that with everyone. It is a nice group of folks, and I'll share with you a couple of things they're actually doing out there. So some of the research that they have completed have found some pretty fascinating things. Number one, lower class individuals have a stronger vagal nerve response. Well, first of all, let me, a couple of terms that we need to kind of clarify. So when we say lower class, we're talking about Washington Redskin fans. Oh God, I'm sorry, that was not, yeah, that joke goes over really, really well in a crowd when you're standing in front of 100 people, especially because there's always Redskin fans out there. So I'm sorry about that. Wasn't very kind. I should be listening to my own message. Lower class, socioeconomic class. We're talking about less educated, less economically gifted, or less economically blessed folks. So we're talking about poor and lower educated. So that's what lower class means. Now, stronger vagal nerve response. This is why this is important. So the vagal nerve, this is the nerve that is that Dacker just talked about, that gets stimulated whenever we witness kind acts, when we feel kindness, when we sense kindness, when we are kind to others. It releases neuropeptides, oxytocin and others, that make us feel good, that make other people feel good. And through the use of mirror neurons and all kinds of cool science that's going on right now, people feel that. They feel it from us. We get that vibe together. It's a really positive, very uniquely human and beautiful thing. Now, what this tells us, though, is that when we say that lower socioeconomic status folks have a stronger vagal nerve response, what we're saying is that when you show folks pictures of people in need or expose them to tragic circumstances, they are more likely to respond with kindness. And that's measurable. This vagal nerve response is measurable. So they measure this, and they're, oh my gosh, the vagal nerve response is stronger. Now you may be asking the following question: stronger than who? Well, the answer is stronger than the rich folks. Yeah, so basically what this tells us is that wealthier people are not having the same response. And who runs our nation? Frankly, who runs our world? Pretty much wealthy white people. So the bottom line is that when you don't have a strong vagal nerve response, you're not as compassionate. And I can give you all an example of this, where this happened with me when I was a number of years ago when my children were home. I was a youth pastor, not exactly a youth pastor, but kind of like a youth pastor. I did a lot of youth programming in our church and worked with other youth ministers around the area, and we did nice, cool trips and things like that. It was a lot of fun. And we were planning on a trip down to New Orleans to do some rebuilding after the hurricane. And I was working with a pastor from a church. Julie, this church is right down the street from us, actually, right there. It's a I can't remember the name of it. It's something Circle. It's not Thomas Circle. It's right down from the seminary, and it is a United Church of Christ. It's a UCC church. And I was working with a pastor from there, and we were planning this trip, and she said, Patrick, my kids won't go. Now, these are kids that are like 13 years old. And I said, well, why won't they go? She goes, well, because they asked me the other day, can't we just write a check? I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's not unique to those kids. The kids all over were like, well, why do we have to go down there? Can't we just like send them money or something? I'm like, oh my gosh. And so what the Berkley scientists are afraid of is that we're venturing into a world of what they're calling a compassion deficit among the wealthy and the most educated. So definitely something to be aware of. We know that lower class gives more money as a percentage of their income. That has been consistent for years. That has not changed at all. I spent 23 years in the military, and the enlisted community always gave a higher percentage of their money to various charitable things than officers did. Always happened. They also say it from Berkeley that 60% of our time we're maximizing our self-interest, and they ponder, wow, I wonder if 40%, maybe we could switch those and spend a little bit more time, maybe 60% of our time thinking about others. I show this, I don't know if I have any Jeep drivers out there. If I do, please give me a thumbs up and let me know. But Jeep drivers have a unique thing that they do. The Jeep Wrangler drivers, this is a Jeep Wrangler, they actually share a wave with one another whenever they're out and about. And so this is a really nice thing. This is actually my Jeep. I drive this thing to work every day, and I get a wave from people, and I love it, and it makes me feel so happy. It makes me feel really, really good. And I think it spreads some kindness and smiling here and there as well. So it's kind of a neat thing. So everybody should go out and buy a Jeep. Workplace benefits, we know that people who witness kindness in the workplace, and this is a very important number, are 287% more likely to be kind to others. That's significant. 287% more likely to repeat that kind behavior. So we know it makes a difference in the workplace. And at this point, people will usually ask, well, Patrick, what about like an organizational strategy? I mean, this all sounds really good. It feels good. It's a really good feeling thing. I'm sorry, just saw the chat. Mini Cooper drivers are the same way. Oh, terrific. I love it. Nice. So anyway, so here's what we want to know. So how do we do this organizationally? Well, if we want these benefits, and I think we all do, then we have to revise our mission and values. We've got to be clear with the people that we work with. We've got to hire better. We've got to help the de-energizers, the people that aren't kind. And sometimes they just simply don't know that they're not kind. It's just a matter of us bringing it to their attention and helping them understand how their behavior might be being viewed by others and recognizing kind behavior. But I can't overemphasize the being clear with employees. We have to be clear about what we expect, and we have to use the words. We can't just say, oh, we want an environment. No, we have to use the words. We want an environment of kindness. We're expecting compassion. Put it down, write it down, make it part of an evaluation. Hiring people, a lot of organizations now are asking a great question in their intake interviews, which is, can you tell me about a time when you were very empathetic in the workplace? What a great question. When was the last time I was empathetic? Everyone's so driven by the bottom line and the metrics and the performance, and all those things are important, but we can get there, and we can get there better with kindness, without a doubt. From a personal standpoint, being good with self, being comfortable with self, being humble and appreciative, being present. These are all important for us in terms of kindness. And then also, these practices are very strong as well. Breathing, practicing compassion. The Dalai Lama once said, if you want compassion, practice compassion. And the same goes with gratitude. And I'll tell you all a quick story about gratitude, that, when we express gratitude, it makes us happier. It makes us healthier, physically and emotionally healthier. And I want to tell you also a quick story. There was a TV show back in the 70s when I was a little boy or in the 60s rather, when I was a little boy, that was called The New Zoo Review. Not many people nowadays know what that show was, but it was a little cartoon, or like, it wasn't a cartoon show, they were little puppets. There was Henrietta Hippo, Freddie the Frog, Woodsy the Owl, and there were two human characters, and the one character, the female half of that human couple, her mother was my third grade music teacher. Now, this is why that's important. So my mom and I grew up relatively poor, and my mom always wanted me to play an instrument. And even as a young boy, she really, really wanted me to play an instrument. And one of the last things I said to her before she passed away a few years ago was to thank her for that gift. And she got together with my third grade music teacher, and they were able to find a guitar, a used old guitar somewhere. And she scraped together $25 for 5 guitar lessons, which were, now I know, were terrible lessons, but they taught me enough to be able to take it from there. And since then, I've played for 50 plus years. And so what's interesting about that story is I was thinking about this when I was thinking about gratitude, and I ended up reaching out to the woman whose mother was my teacher. Now, my teacher wouldn't be alive now. But I thought maybe this woman is, and since she and her husband were pretty famous in the 60s for this show, I went to that great, wonderful research depository, Wikipedia. And of course, I found her, and I sent an email to their company, and I said, if you can please get this message to Emmy Jo Marmory is her name. I said, if you can get this message to her, I said, I would love to just share with her what her mother meant to me, even as a little 9-year-old, 8-year-old boy. I got the most delightful message back from her. It was just a tear-jerking message about how so many people over the years had reached out to her to talk about her mom. And, you know, and here it was many, many years after her mom's passed away, and she's still hearing from her mother's former students. I have to tell you all, I'm not telling you the story to tell you that I'm a great guy or something, because I'm really not, but the feeling of expressing that gratitude to someone whose mother made such an amazing impact on my life, it was important. And I think it's important that we all do this, because there are chemical, biological, neurological changes that occur in our bodies when we do these things. And it does make the world a better place. The great outdoors, well, I mean, we're all spending a lot more time in the outdoors now. At least we're trying to socially distance, of course. But I encourage that, you know, the fresh air, you know, being outside. You got more people now running and hiking and walking and spending time outdoors. I know that I live on a sailboat, so the boating industry has gone crazy this summer. It's impossible to get any work done on my boat, which is my house, so I kind of need it when I need it. But it's such a popular thing now because people are getting out. The great outdoors are wonderful. I always talk about the desert Southwest too. If you've never been out there, it's definitely worth it. And then cultivating touch. Now, obviously, this looks a little different now in terms of our environment, but touch therapy is very powerful. And there is a lot of research and work in medicine now on touch therapy. The skin, the human organ, the skin, is the largest organ in our body, and it's also the most sensitive. And touch has an extraordinarily powerful impact on human beings. A gentle touch, appropriate at the right time, can send such a strong message. So I love doing this in person because I like to see who my huggers in the room are, and we just line up and hug each other after the session. Can't do that now, but I always joke with the huggers. Listen, huggers, right now you're rejoicing, going, yeah, doggone right, touch. I'm absolutely onto that. But what we got to remember as huggers is not everybody's into touch. So please, by all means, please, when you are doing that touch thing, please make sure that you are aware of the person that you're approaching and whether that person is a toucher or a hugger or not. So I came back on video so I can show you all this. I'm the hugger. So I'm going to approach you, and as I'm going to approach you, my arms are going out. I am ready to, I've launched. I'm at this angle coming at you. I'm launched, ready for the hug. And huggers, if you're like me, you got to make sure, look in their eyes, make sure you know this is welcome, because if you see hands down and these eyes, abort the hug. Just go the other direction. Exit left, stage right, whatever you've got to do. Don't do it. Don't do it because they don't want you to hug them. Not everybody wants you to hug them. So please, I'm a fan of hugging, but please, if you're a hugger, you're not a hugger, just make sure, huggers, you know what you're doing. We have a faculty member that's been with GAO for 50 years. She's a magnificent, brilliant woman who is not a hugger. And I saw her at a faculty meeting. I hadn't seen her in about a year. And I actually went up to her and I said, Nancy, it's so good to see you. And I wrapped my arms around her and I realized it was too late. I didn't follow my own advice. I've got her locked in a hug right like this. She's not moving. I'm like, how am I going to get out of this right now? Because I know I shouldn't be doing this. And I'm just sitting there thinking, how is this going to happen? And she's like a stiff as a board. And I'm like, Nancy, it's so good to see you. So anyway, huggers, please do recall that. Abort the hug. LOL, absolutely. So anyway, all right. So I think that was my last slide. So this is my homework for you all. Then, of course, any questions that you all have. So National Kindness Day. February 17th. There's also like a National Kind Acts Day, but don't pay attention to that one. This is the one I want you to know. I am trying to break the American University server. I want emails from everybody on this day saying, hey, Patrick, this is what I did that was kind. I do this kindness, different versions of this kindness talk, some of them much, much longer, of course, but the same general message all over the country. And I've been asking people to start sending me emails. If you'll put this on your phone as a recurring event, email Patrick on February 17th and tell him what I did that was kind. It would mean the world to me. And I would greatly, greatly appreciate that, because I'd like to get like 5,000 in one day. Then I can send an email to Dacker out at Berkeley and say, look what we did out here on the East Coast. And then I can also get in trouble with the AU server folks. So with that said, this is my contact information. So by all means, pmalone@american.edu, and Julie just put that out there as well. Please reach out to us. Our program, our Key Executive Leadership Program, is a program that is designed for nonprofit and public sector folks. We do a lot of leadership development in this area. We've been doing it for 50 years or more. And we have a lot of free events throughout the year, webinars and Wednesday sessions and Monday mindfulness sessions. And just go to our website and please take a look. We have all kinds of cool things. And if you have any questions about the programs that we do, we customize a lot of programs for agencies. We work with a lot of nonprofits and a lot of public sector organizations on customizing leadership development programs for them as well. We've been out there doing this for a while. We've been doing mindfulness meditation and heart and soul for a very, very long time, and we love doing it. I'm happy to share the slides as well. I need to shrink them down to make them transportable. I'm sure that there's probably a mechanism. We're probably going to end up doing that more formally, but also happy to share resources with you all. Anything that you can possibly think of, we are always there and always happy to be a part of it. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and see if there are any questions, anything at all that I can answer for anyone, comments, anything at all. And forgive me while I take a drink of my orange juice without, being professional. Would you mind sharing how you transitioned from Naval Hospital Administration to programs at American? Oh, great. Awesome question. So yeah, Eric, I started in the private sector with a company named Accenture. And it's now called, it was called Arthur Anderson and Company at the time. I was a consultant with them, healthcare consultant. And I was a hospital administrator by professional trade in the civilian sector before I did that. And then I went into the military because I wanted to work in the public service. And I had a great opportunity to do hospital administration in the Navy. And while I was there, the Navy sent me to get my PhD. And whenever I got to the PhD, I came to American, where I did my work there, started teaching as an adjunct, and ended up going from hospital administration into leadership development for healthcare executives, and then continued to do that work for public sector at American. So I ended up teaching as an adjunct for AU I guess I started in 2000 as an adjunct at AU. But I was still in the Navy, and I ended up getting deployed to Iraq and doing all kinds of things at the time, but was always able to maintain my work at AU. And then when I left, when I retired from the Navy, I was at the medical school. I actually thought I was going to take my uniform off one day and put on nicer clothes the next day, but I ended up getting an opportunity to come work in the Key program, and one thing led to another, and the previous director kind of wrote me in there knowing he was going to retire, that dog, and I became the director. So that's how I got in there. And Eric, I'm more than happy to share some more detail with you if you'd like to talk privately. It was a big transition. There's a lot to think about going from the military into the private sector, which is what I did. And especially for those that have had military service, there's a very strong culture and almost a cocoon that you're in. And when you leave, you realize that cocoon really is a lot different than maybe what you thought it was, not in a negative way, but it's just different. So Garcia, yes, I'm sorry, Kay Garcia, have you done any work related to punctuation in email? Oh, very good. Exclamation points. Coming from a place of kindness. Obviously, they aren't appropriate in all situations. I had a conversation with a group of women a few weeks ago, and some felt very strongly that women who use exclamation points in emails are perpetuating a problem for women in the workplace. Interesting. I do disagree with that. I'm sorry, I keep calling you Kay Garcia. Kay Garcia, I completely agree with you. I think that use of exclamation points. I think that's one of the downsides of email communication, obviously, is there's no context. If I use exclamation points or if I use caps, of course, caps is not a good thing. I think that, you write from the heart, and if you are working in an environment where you know one another and you've built the social fabric, then I'm talking about people that you work with regularly that really kind of know you. Obviously, you can be a lot less formal. I do a lot of smiley faces in my emails. I always do that. If I write an email and I think there's even a chance that someone could think I'm being like just directive or mean, I put a smiley face after it. And I got no problem doing that. So I've never thought about the gender aspect of exclamation points, and I'm really not qualified to comment on it, but I've never thought that, I've never in my life thought, oh my gosh, that person is a woman and she's using exclamation points, but if she were a man, I'd feel differently. That just never crossed my mind. But then again, I am a man, so you know what I'm not capable of doing. I mean, men miss the boat on a lot of things. So a really good point, though. Very, very good question. I do think it's important with email, and I see the next comment on that. I think it is important to, know your audience. It's important to know your audience. I will tell you all a funny story. I'm working on a book right now with my partner, and she and I have been writing this book for a couple months. It's due in like 2 weeks. It's on laughing and loving and leadership. And our argument is that laughter and love is what makes up good leadership. Not leadership models, not leadership graphics, not leadership acronyms, and not leadership certifications, but rather laughter and love from the heart is what makes great leaders. And one of the stories we're going to open this book with is a gentleman who emailed his boss, a woman emailed her boss and said, my grandmother died and I'm going to have to leave to go to the funeral. I hope that's okay. The boss replied back and said, hey, I'm so sorry to hear that. Please know that we're with you. We're thinking of you. LOL. The woman replied back and said, wait, you just wrote laugh out loud? What was that about? The boss replied back and said, oh my goodness, I thought that meant lots of love. So that little engagement, there's beauty about it for a lot of reasons. One reason is because the boss wrote something that could have easily been very offensive, laugh out loud, right? Your grandmother died, that's terrible. The boss honestly didn't know that. And the employee went back to the boss and said, hey, wait, do you know what this means? The boss said, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And then the lady whose grandmother passed away started laughing and said, you know what? You actually made me laugh for the first time today. Thank you. Now, this is what I mean. And this is kind of my, back to the whole kindness thing. Everyone, this is so important. It's the human connection. I mean, it's the human connection. You can't get this out of a book. You can't go to a course at Harvard or wherever and get a certification and become a leader. That's not the way it works. It's the authenticity and the realness that you bring. And you're the only one that knows that. Our book is filled with this, is filled with the word try this, try that, try this, try that. Because not everything works for everyone. There is no magic elixir to leading. And there is no magic elixir to kindness, but it does begin with a really deep dive into what we're about and whether we are willing to be authentic about who we are. And to go back to Kay Garcia's question about the exclamation points, you know what? Everyone needs to assume noble intent. Just assume noble intent. People aren't out there trying to hurt us. They're not out there trying to be offensive. And for those that are, we'll figure out who they are and we'll deal with them. But by and large, I just don't think that people have it in their hearts to be offensive and rude at all. I just really don't. So please assume noble intent. That'll be a good, strong step toward kindness. Got a couple minutes left in the session, according to Julie. So I'm going to, any other comments that I can talk too much about? And once again, folks, I'm sorry. I'll keep talking if you don't type. I appreciate everyone's attention. It's been great. I wish we had the opportunity to meet under different circumstances. I do hope that you'll continue to be a part of all the programs. And thanks to Wesley, we love the seminary folks next door. It's great to partner with them on this. They've been great. I know we'll be doing much, much more with them. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'll just kind of hang out until my next session starts. Julie, thank you for all your help.
You're welcome.